Hello and welcome to the Men's Corner podcast. I'm George Stumenov. It's great to see you here. Okay, today I want to talk to you about something really exciting. I've written this new book called The Fatherhood and the Blueprint for Masculinity. In this book, I talk not just about the fatherhood, which I did in a little short book that I published a while ago, but this new book almost includes the old book and adds another book to that, because very often as men who are in the journey of healing or like a therapeutic space, or you want to recover from addiction, you want to be better, very often we know what we want to recover from. In other words, we know what we don't want to be, but we don't know what we're meant to be. So we know what we want to recover from, but we don't know what we're recovering for. And nobody tells you that. Like, I've never met a little boy who, when he grew up, wanted to become not an addict, or not a bad man, or not a racist, whatever. It's like, no, there's a blueprint within men that helps us know what we want to be. That's why we watch superhero movies and things like that. We want someone to emulate because there's a destiny written in there. But then as we grow up, it gets, to put it mildly, just suppressed. And this is the nature of the world. It always has been the nature of the world. This is a world that is not perfect, and everyone, man or woman, come into it is to some degree traumatized, but also deformed in order to be not able to fulfill their destiny. So I argue that there is a blueprint of masculinity that all men share, but most of us have not tapped into. And that blueprint is a very generic thing. So it's just made up of different traits and values and abilities. Like the ability to be masculine in general, on the whole, to handle things in a masculine way. But then some men have that developed more. But then also there is the uniqueness of the man, the soul, your personality, what makes you who you are. Not even your personality, but like your emotions, your desires. And that can get damaged as well. But it's like when you match the blueprint, in other words, the strength, the values, the ability to be masculine in a different expression, when you match that with the soul, with the uniqueness of the man, you have a very, very good thing. But how often does it happen? You see men who have got more of that blueprint, like being more manly, in a more physical, immediate way. Very often they have very little connection with their own soul because the soul is traumatized. So they've learned how to shut that off. Trauma did that for them. Or on the opposite, you have men who are in touch with their souls, but the soul, as I said, traumatized. It's not good, it's not enough. It's maybe enough to be human, it's maybe enough to get you some recognition, some creativity, some ability to connect to others, but it's not enough to help you fulfill your destiny as a man. You need more than that. So I argue that you need both, the masculine blueprint and the soul. And this is how I do it. I'm gonna go through the book chapter by chapter. Chapter 1 I call the fatherless world, and I argue that it's fatherlessness that causes the biggest inner problems of men, and therefore the world. It's not motherlessness for sure, because a mother's connection with the boy is more immediate, is more obvious. It's like, yes, if the mother doesn't feed the boy, he's not gonna make it when he's a baby. But then at some point, father needs to step in, and the father doesn't. And why doesn't he? Not just because men tend to be bad and worse than women, but because a father-son connection is spiritual, it's not physical, it's not immediate, it's not something you can see. And in the past, because men needed to be tough and practical, they needed more of that blueprint, then fathers knew how important it was for men to be trained. Yeah, did they do it in a perfect way? Not at all. It was more like the stiff upper lip thing. It's like, yeah, you need to learn how to be a man. But since now you don't, and now there are far less fathers anyway present, the father is just another parent. it's almost like you have two mothers, and that's not good. That's not good for masculinity. So it's only the father that helps the son develops his masculinity, and I argue that at length in that chapter 1, using examples from the world, Elvis Presley, Ernest Hemingway, especially Hemingway. I also use an example from Dead Poets Society, when the boy shot himself with his father's gun because of the father's expectations. So I look at the two sides of two extremes of masculinity, the macho or the tough, stiff upper lip, and just the soft, sensual but helpless version. They're two extremes, and being stuck at one end or another is just as bad. But we can't help it. It's our fathers who form us. And that's why I wrote the book, to gain understanding of that and get out of it eventually in time. So, fatherless world. Chapter 2, man-hating society. And there is this quote by Chesterton. It's like, if a man has grown up learning how to hate his father and grandfather, and then you expect of him to love all humanity or something like that, it's not going to work. But because of the fatherlessness of the past, because our fathers didn't love us and our grandfathers, in fact quite opposite, there was abuse and all sorts of things going on, for the most part. I'm talking about the dangerous dark side of men, not just like everyone. But because our world collectively has suffered from men, from the dark side of men, even though they built society as we know it, there was dark side to them which they didn't obviously express and own and honor and give attention to, because the world was different. They just couldn't. There was no this was just impossible. Because of that, now there are generations of men recently who hate masculinity. It's the sour grapes. It's like, my father never loved me. My father never made me part of this world, never made me feel like a man. And this is all unspoken for the most part, unexpressed, unconscious. And therefore I hate that. I see that I can't have it, and I just can see the bad stuff. I just can see toxic masculinity. I can only see that. So who wants that? But if you've been fathered properly, if you've been fathered, not parented, fathered by a strong father who had that masculine blueprint, you would see true toxic masculinity, and you see things that are not toxic. You see that toxic masculinity can be a caricature, but not completely to be dismissed, because behind it there are good desires. There is a reason why people follow Andrew Tate. There is a reason. Do you think all these people are evil? No, not at all. He is a symptom of something. Like back in the day, when Germany was weak, Hitler was a symptom of something. He started to claim to bring strength to them. And at the beginning, when Germany was strong, they laughed at him, literally laughed at him. But then, some years later, during the Great Depression, they started taking him seriously, because they said, okay, bad strength is better than no strength. And this is the world. There is no vacuum. So, father, less world, man-hating society. That's how it seems to work. And there's just an example that I can give about this young man I was working with ages ago, and he was talking to me about his girlfriend, and he says like, I don't know, I can't deal with her. She, if she starts crying, I start crying too. And this particular man, he hated anything to do with toxic masculinity. He was such a lover of literature, but he wouldn't go near Hemingway because he knew that he was a toxic guy. Like, see how polluted we are by judging everything with this, because we've been wounded and we've been lied to. And so he was very sensitive about this toxic masculinity. And yet, as I was talking to him, I said, okay, he said, I get emotional so easily because I guess he said, I was brought up by my mom, not by my father, who's a horrible man, he said. And now when my girlfriend starts feeling emotional, I do the same, and then we're both in this rut. And I said to him, you have a strength that you're not using. These words came to me. It was very risky, but I said it. I didn't even know him that well. And he thought for a long time about this, to his credit. And it's the strength of our fathers that when we reject everything that's toxic, It happens subconsciously. I'm not talking political movements. I'm not talking when you're in university. I'm talking when you're little, when you can't get from your father the masculinity that you crave. Then when you grow up, you learn to either push against it or to try and get it on your own. I'll show them. And that's what creates loud bullies, aggressive, who, by the way, often get the job done, as we see in our world today. But it's still the same place of wounding. It's the father wound. One goes weak, the other goes overcompensating, but they're both wounded, empty inside. And that's not a good place to be. And this is what I talk about in this chapter. Man-hating society. Now, chapter 3 is very interesting. It's called Father Hunger. And I argue that father hunger is the root of all this. Years ago, more than a decade ago, I watched this documentary that I couldn't get out of my mind. It's called What Our Fathers Did, My Nazi Legacy. And it's about two people whose fathers were very high-ranking Nazi war criminals, basically. Very, very famous. One was one of those Nazis was Hans Frank, also known as the Butcher of Poland. He butchered people, not personally, obviously, but his orders, his politics. He was Hitler's puppet there. And the other one was working under him, Otto von Wachter. Otto von Wachter was also a very high-ranking Nazi. His signature is on many documents that had people, Jews from the ghetto, rounded up, like killed, and just atrocities, just horrible, horrific acts. In this fascinating documentary, the sons of the two people, of those two war criminals, meet, and the documentary is about them coming to terms with their father's legacy, as it says in the title. But when I watched that over a decade ago, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. One of those men hated his father with such passion. He was in his 70s. I think he's still around. Just completely, almost demonic hatred. Now, a man in his 70s who wrote a whole book, quite thick, I've actually got the book, about just cursing his father, basically. You did this, you did that, you're a horrible man. And his father was a horrible man in his action, in his actions in the world. He carried a picture of his father immediately after his death at Nuremberg, because he was hanged. He carries a picture of his father's dead body, and like every day with him. And when they asked him why, he said, because I want to assure myself that he's dead. Now that's not natural, that's not politics, that's not hatred of Nazism. Definitely, it's far more than that. When the other guy came into the picture, you see a totally different attitude. First of all, you see a man who's healthier physically. And for our Western mind is very divided. It's like when you're physically sick, you go to the doctor. When you're mentally sick, you go to the psychiatrist. And it's like, no, you are one, you're whole. That's why I love the Hebrew view of like holistic, like the heart. The heart is not just feelings, it's your mind as well. But anyway, that's another rabbit hole. But the Western mind, which is kind of Greek, it's really divided. And that's why we're at war in ourselves. We think we're at war with our true selves, but actually we're at war with things that are not meant to be part of ourselves, with desires. So that's a different story, but I just want to give you a picture. It's like, okay, we don't have it all together in terms of our outlook. You see this man, first of all, he's slimmer, healthier, he looks well. He behaves a bit foolishly. That's the second thing that struck me, because he, either foolishly or there's more behind the scenes, which there is, he more or less defended his father. He didn't defend his father's actions, obviously being a Nazi. He didn't say that this was good, but he said my father was a good man, and he actually tried to change the system on the inside. He even said that. He said he was trying to help Hitler change his mind about the Jews. Really? It's horrific. I shouldn't laugh. But to the last minute, until the last minute of the documentary, his name, Horst von Wachter, the son of Otto von Wachter, Horst was just denying more or less that his father had been a real war criminal. He said no, he wasn't like them. And so I watched this thing and I'm thinking, okay, what even 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, what are the, like, why? And there were people denouncing him. They said, oh, maybe Horst is a Nazi like his father. Do you think Horst is a Nazi? Said the interviewer. But it's like, no, there's more than that. That willful blindness, there's something behind that. So the first person, the son of Hans Frank, whose name is Nicholas Frank, and I bless both those men. I have nothing, it's not a personal thing, it's just observation of their personalities and their attitudes. It's an analysis, shall we say. So it's not a personal thing, I'm not attacking them at all. I mean, I've got these things within me, but I've been dealing with them, and that's why I'm passionate about these things. So the son of Hans Frank, the butcher of Poland, when he was growing up, he describes a moment how his father was shaving and he walked into the bathroom and his father took some of his shaving cream and he put it on his nose, put it on the boy's nose. And then he said, this was the only intimate, tender moment that we shared. Can you believe it? The only time that you can pinpoint. This is the only time of intimacy between me and my father. His father thought that his mother had a lover and that Nicholas is the child of another man, basically. So he ostracized him from the beginning. His siblings used to say to him, you're not one of us, you're not one of us. His father wanted nothing to do with Nicholas. And it shows. It shows. Dare I say, obviously not everything is, I'm not projecting everything in that holistic way, but he was physically, didn't look like a healthy man. He was a chain smoker, he was smoking all the time. Yes. How sad, how sad. It comes down to this. It's not about politics, it's about love and the lack thereof. So when you look at the world today divided, the right defending masculinity, traditional values, just going all militant about borders, these are all very masculine blueprint thing. Because they've had fathers, or they had those people who subscribe to these things, I see as they've had some sort of masculine input, some of them like whatever, army, but coach, sports coach, but there was some masculinity that was given to them and say, oh yeah, I'm a man. Do they take it out to extreme? Of course, some people, like Ernest Hemingway, like I just described, but there was the masculine blueprint to a point was there. I feel like a man. There are other things that are lacking, but like a man I feel, or I know what it's like, so I want to be that. And when you go to the left, it's like, no, this is wrong, no. And very often, even when you see the people, especially like in America, when you see people who are on the right, you see more like physically bigger people, former army, tattoos, whatever. And when you go to the left, you see more, I would say, tender, gentle, I would even say feminized people. But I make the point that we're all feminized to a point. And so what's the left about? It's about, daddy didn't love me. I hate that because he made me hate myself. I can't have masculinity, so I don't want anything to do with it. In fact, anyone or anything that shows that, I want to eradicate that. I want to defend the weak and whatever. But that's out of that luck again. And the right is like, no, I'm going to defend my father no matter what. So they think they're defending values. Very often is, I'm defending the fatherland. I don't know if that all makes sense, but I hope by the time we reach the end, it will. And if it doesn't, read the book. Right. So, father hunger. Father hunger. My Nazi legacy, that documentary. You have two men, Horst von Wachter, the son of Otto von Wachter, and the Nicholas Frank, the son of Hans Frank. They hate one hates his father, the other one loves his father. And when you go back to watch this, you say, okay, Nicholas's father hated him basically, didn't want anything to do with him. But Horst's father, Yes, he was a Nazi war criminal, but when you watch his family home movies, home footage, he's got his boy on his neck, on his shoulders, running around. He was a good family man. And that's why Horst defended him, because he had received from him that love. And it's like, no matter what he does from now on, this is a different story. And I totally understand that. I understand both of them. That's why I'm doing this thing, this podcast, because they both genuine, legitimate expressions of humanity as relating to the father wound and the father love. Out there, what goes on out there in the world is not politics. It's this playing out for the most part. A lot more, obviously, but it's the inner world of men and women. But we're talking about men now, and men seem to be shaping society in a way that's lasting. Emerson said that the reason why the world is broken and lies in broken heaps is because man is disunited within himself. That's exactly it. Let's move on. Chapter 4, the father wound. Well, we've spoken about the father wound a lot. Just a quote by John Eldridge to begin with. Every boy in his journey to become a man takes an arrow in the center of his heart, in the place of his strength. Because the wound is rarely discussed and even more rarely healed, every man carries a wound, and the wound is nearly always given by his father. I remember I was 15 years old, going out in this local club and wanting to be one of the guys, wanting to be, it's literally the first time I started going out in the summer vacation, summer holiday. And I just wanted to belong with my peers, with my friends. And then this guy, he was a bully. He just kind of was joking with me, and it took a turn for the worse. And he just punched me, just because he felt like it. I didn't provoke him. I was a joker. I had no toughness. My father is a tough man. I'm not. And then going home, my father saw the black eye, and I was like, what happened? I told him what happened. And he said, you need to get them, right? You know, tomorrow, after tomorrow, get this guy, because there were like 2 guys involved, one by one. Otherwise, they'll keep doing this to you. And he said it with quite a passion. He was passionate. He wasn't bad to me, but he said it as it is. But we didn't have that intimacy. Nothing to rest on, nothing to... There was no bit like in those stages of the masculine journeys, like the first stage was missing, no closeness. And then everything else from that stage, is not resting on anything substantial. So the whole structure can crumble, and like mine did. And I felt, I just can't do this. And then my father looked at me and said something that I was only 15, I'm 40 now, that I'll always remember. Even though I've forgiven him a long time ago, I don't feel anything when he said that, but I just feel for the rest of humanity, because that happens to all of us. That happened to my father, in some ways, in different ways. He said, oh, don't worry, yeah, I'll sort it out. You're not made for this. You're not like that. And I remember just hating myself, saying, you little worm, I wish I could just take you out of my body, little boy, and just put a bullet through your head, because you're not like that. And I want to be like that. I want to be like my father. So I started lifting weights, shaved my head, became big. And I started to try to become like that. But the right approach would have been like, first of all, okay, yeah, something happened there. You need help. You need help. What happened to your confidence? What happened? Is it something to do with, is it physical? Is it fighting? Maybe you need some martial arts. Maybe I'll teach you some things, or I'll send you to someone who knows. So, but that's an open conversation between a father and a son that got this baseline of intimacy, and we didn't. So I just shut down, hated myself, destroyed myself in the next 5, 6 years, 10 years. The father wound. It's powerful. Whether or not your father was absent, you needed him, that's a wound. Unmet father love. That manifests later in life. It will manifest. Or he was there, but he was just bad. Or had moments that really hurt you, wounded you. You never felt like you could please him. It's all the father wound, and things manifest later in life. We don't get that love. We shut down our hearts. We become weak and small inside, and then feeling unable to handle the world. Or we become driven bullies, and it's like, I'll show you, father, I'll show you were wrong about me. And I had a little bit of that as well. I remember later when I got involved with violence, it was like every time, almost like, yeah, you see, I've got it. I've got it. Who is the loser when you try to prove your father wrong? You are. I am. We need to go back and revisit our father wound. Chapter 5, I've called The Deformity of Man. And talk about whether or not we're trying to escape our fathers. We have traits that are just like them. And unless we own them, they're going to manifest, and we, in some ways, we might even be worse. Yes, we might not be violent like our fathers, but there's other types of violence. There's a silent violence. When you can't give what you never had from your father, that robs your children from things. So it's like you're violating them, but in a nice way. Well wounded, my friends. There's no escape, but there is a way through this wound to become strong for who we're meant to be. Masculine, but also tender, like a warrior poet. You can't have too much of the warrior, you can't have too much of the poet. You need both. What was Jesus? Was he strong? Was he this military leader? Or was he just a spiritual, soft, tender man who loved children and little lamb? Both. Humanity. I believe that's humanity. Perfect humanity. The rest of us are just stumbling along because we're wounded. Because it's a wounding, traumatizing world to be born into. And I talk a lot about having moved against our fathers, like choosing to be subconsciously, obviously, as we've grown up. Well, not obviously, because sometimes it's quite conscious, but as we grow up, often we move against our fathers because I'll never be like that. Well, that's a bad thing to say. Not because your father was good and you should take his crap and you should emulate him. No, but because you throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's better to deal with that immediate pain and trauma, whatever it is, but then reclaim your father's heritage, because you don't want to move against your own humanity. He's half of what made you human, basically. You move against your father, you move against a huge part of yourself that goes underground, and bad things happen as a result. Or good things don't happen as a result, which is just as bad. And in that chapter, obviously chapters are a lot broader and there's so much in that book, but I've just picked one story from each chapter. I talk about a documentary that I watched back in 2017, and I haven't been able to stop watching it since. Especially now, I work with men on probation. But even before that, it's called The Work 2017. It's about a prison therapy group that's been running successfully, very successfully, for like 20 years. And finally, for the first time in 2017, outsiders were allowed in with a camera crew, and it was wow. This is not just talking therapy, it's not just people sharing like normal men's group. This is really intense digging into what made us who we present ourselves to be. And what really is the shocker is like some of those prisoners on the inside who've been doing this work, that's why it's called The Work, far more healthy. And some of those are murderers, right? The society has written those off because of what they've done. I'm not saying they shouldn't be punished. I'm just saying how they've managed to gain this redemption. And you see their eyes and it's like clarity, it's like childlikeness, and yet tough, strong men. And you see people on the outside, it's like looking at myself before I even was aware of these things. It's a pretty sad picture, and yet they were normal men. One of those normal men, and none of those normal men believed that they really needed much of that therapy, because they were not criminals, they were not locked up. They were interested in it, but they didn't really fully understand how much they needed it. And so one of those men was talking about his father, and his father left him a long time ago. And he said, and I'm going to read the quote, he says, his name is Charles. "I never knew my place in this world," Charles went on to say, emotion slowly rising to the surface as he continued. "Nobody to teach me how to be a man." Opening his soul more and more with each sentence, Charles confessed that he had been deeply hurt by his father's abandonment of him. "I've always felt that empty spot in my life," he sighed, "like I was missing something, like a part of me." He then paused. Look, he's got something there, he's onto something. He then paused and did something which most of us ordinary men would do. He tried to minimize it all and shove the emotion back down from whence it had come. But the men in the circle were anything but ordinary. Those imprisoned convicts, those least among the lowly, were in fact emotional giants. Supported by their deep understanding and fierce strength, Charles was able to continue on his quest for the truth. "I'm trying to be for my kid what he was not for me," he said, downcast. The man on his left side, a prisoner, asked him to clarify. "Explain that," he said. "How are you able to fill that space?" Charles went on. "Number one, being there, constantly letting them know that I love them, not just through material things, but actually saying the words, giving them hugs and kisses, encouragement." The man next to him didn't miss a beat. He was hunting for something and had found his mark. He spoke again. "Do you think they feel any of that sadness that you're pouring out in an attempt to feed them love?" "Yes," came the answer right away. There was no hesitation. Charles had found the piece of truth he'd been searching for. It was not what he wanted, but definitely what he needed. He hung his head as the first pangs of grief made their way to the surface, in what the others were hoping would be the beginning of a liberating journey. Wow. When you're trying desperately to not be like your father and to do the opposite of what he's done, other people feel the motivation. They don't see it, they can't put their fingers on it, but you feel when someone is doing something consistently, chronically, over time. You feel the energy behind that, and it's not a good energy. In Charles' life, in Charles' example, is grief, a lot of sadness. I would never be like him. He left me, and I would be the opposite. But you're still on your own. You're still fatherless. You're still disconnected. And I'm not saying go to connect with your lost father. What if he's not here? What if he's dead? What if you never met him? But there's a way to be connected to our fathers without having to meet them in many ways that I describe in this book. In chapter 6, I talk about the need for masculine initiation. And this is what keeps people separated, like we spoke about earlier, from between the macho man divided and between that weak, ineffectual man. They're both overcompensating sides of masculinity. So we need both. We need it all, but we don't have it all. Because we're either not loved, like very often that the shy, withdrawn, quiet man whose desires he can't even express them, even make him conscious. The father didn't love him very often. Partly that was me as well. But then you have the other one, it's like tough, strong. Think Ernest Hemingway, think Theodore Roosevelt. I'm going to talk about these two men. I've spoken about these two men at length. Because here we talk about initiation into being a warrior. And they've taken that ability that their father did show him. The father was with them. Maybe there was not much baseline of love. They were not accepted for who they are. But they said, oh, I'm a man because my father was hunting with me, boxing with me. He showed me how to do these manly things. So that's my identity now. But they're pushing it because they want to make up for that. They don't feel good enough about themselves. Hemingway, huge gender confusion. Huge, absolutely. And his father also, yes, his father did spend time with him, but he was very harsh in terms of he had to meet these standards when he was teaching him things. And he didn't accept his love for literature. Isn't that a joke? Because Hemingway is this huge, like one of the greatest writers. And his father, that's one thing that his father wouldn't accept about him. I guess he was afraid because of that tenderness that comes with feeling and writing. And no, he wanted him to be a man's man. Which, ironically, he still would have been, because his father spent time with him. But look what a bullying, what a bullish personality. It's just a joke. It's ugly, especially in someone in his late life. This is, if you're a teenager, okay, maybe you still have time to change. But when you're 50 and you still behave like that, it's just so ugly, and it's sad, because you can be giving good things to people. You can be a pillar of strength. Theodore Roosevelt, when his father was teaching him things, when Theodore was little, he had some sort of illness, sickness. He was a very sickly child. In other words, he had a weak body, and his father said to him, just like my father said to me, "You're not made for this." And then I went on to make myself for this, good enough for this, and I could have gotten in huge trouble, arrested, in prison, dead. So Theodore Roosevelt, in the same way, his father said to him, "Theodore, you have the mind, but you do not have the body. What a verdict on that. Instead of saying things like, I must help you. I must help you become stronger. I'm not judging the father. Who knows what I would have done or said, especially in those days. We're talking a long time ago. When life was a lot more harsher reality. You need to be strong in every way that you can as a man. Just to go through life normally. Let alone accomplish anything. And Theodore said as a response, I will make my body. And he did. He became this athlete, outdoorsman, boxing, whatever. But it was out of proportion because he didn't accept that little child, because he couldn't, even later in life. Because we can't make the unconscious conscious. There are very few people who can. Now, we live in this wonderful world where that's possible, but then it's like, yeah, good luck. Some people still did, obviously, but it was a lot harder, shall we say. He couldn't just go to therapy and talk to his therapist. And even if he did, like many people do now, these are deeper things than many therapists would even know about. I'm not claiming that I will make a better therapist, don't hear me wrong, but it's just then from what I've seen, that's the nature of reality. These are deepest things that have the potential to be completely life-changing, but very few lives have been completely turned around and changed by therapy. They have, over time, but sometimes, in my experience with men, it's like this masculinity focus is just still, people get better from things, but very rarely do they rediscover their whole destiny. It's what I'm saying, and this is what I'm discussing here. So Theodore Roosevelt, after his father said, you don't have the body, you have the mind, but not the body, he said, I will make my body. And he went on to prove, I guess, to himself that he would never be weak. He hated weakness, obviously. He was a great man in many ways. He achieved so much, my goodness, about conservation. He was one of the greatest presidents. So I'm not judging him, but I'm just dissecting his personality a little bit to see what made him that macho figure that was a little bit kind of stupid and out of proportion, like Ernest Hemingway. Probably better in terms of less of a bully, maybe. I don't know. But you can see how he took his masculinity out of proportion. I will never be weak. And when he was 50 or 51, something like that, he was sparring with his military aide in the White House. He got hit so hard by this younger, stronger guy. Presumably he was stronger, he was a younger guy. And he lost the eyesight in one of his eyes. What a shame. What a shame for a man in his 50s who is a president to not be able to protect himself at all, to not look after himself. And because you have one body, you have one mind, you give blessings to the world through this. You don't take it seriously. You're still being a little boy running around, a teenager rather, trying to prove yourself how strong you are. Look. So he lost, and only then did he stop boxing. And then he turned into jiu-jitsu or wrestling. And it's like, obviously I'm not diminishing boxing, and I mean I do a little bit. There's an element of that I always will do, like punch back, a bit of sparring, things like that, just to stay sharp. Boxing is like, wow. I mean, I think every man should know how to throw a punch, perhaps maybe take a punch as well, because it's useful, shall we say, and also gives you this confidence, quiet confidence that, yeah, I've been there, I can do that. But look how extreme Theodore Roosevelt was. So we looked at Hemingway. He's extreme because he wanted to prove to himself, to his father perhaps, that he was lovable, to himself that he, despite this deep gender confusion and this feeling of probably not being loved, doesn't belong in his own body, probably. I will be the man that I saw my father was. And with Roosevelt, it's like, I will never be weak. And from out of these vows comes that drivenness. And Hemingway just drove himself to death. Many times he tried to die. Subconsciously or consciously, he tried to die. And then he did it consciously. Very often it's internalized and then it manifests out in the world. So these are two men from popular culture, Roosevelt and Hemingway, that were undisputedly warriors. Boxing, hunting, wars. So you can't doubt that they're fighters, they're warriors, but you doubt their souls, their hearts, their ability to feel. Does it mean that being a warrior is bad? Well, according to much of the world today, yes, it does. I don't want to be like this toxic man. I think that being a warrior is a genuine part of masculinity. But the problem is that they lack the other parts, and so that's all they've got. And that's why it's caricature, it's ugly. But then, here and there are glimpses of this being put in its proper place. Obviously, nobody's perfect. But I am looking at the example of Bear Grylls. When you look at Bear Grylls, he's the survival expert here in the UK, beloved TV personality, lovely man, family man. Used to be in the special forces, SAS. Now that's a tough man. He could kill you with his bare hands. He's not a big guy either. He's a normal, wiry little guy. I don't know how little he is, but he doesn't look big at all. And yet, I've no doubt that he could snap my neck if he wanted to. Just kill me. The thing is with him, you don't feel he's intimidating. You don't feel he's trying to intimidate you at all. You know he's a warrior. So if I was on a desert island, or if I was attacked by a bunch of men, who would I want to be next to me? Hemingway? Theodore Roosevelt? Or Bear Grylls? Well, SAS, survival, grit, toughness, Bear Grylls. But who would you like to just spend your time with, learn from, have a drink with? Without being worried that, this guy's always overbearing, he's always loud, and he's always has to be the center of attention, he might try to bully me, whatever. Bear Grylls, he's a family man, he's a man of faith as well. He's got this goodness that he radiates. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, why? How come he's a warrior, undisputedly, but also he's got his heart, he's got bigger things than how tough he is. He doesn't need the big muscles, he doesn't need the big neck to, When you look at how he grew up, his father spent time with him, but his father also pushed him. And I talk about, in John Eldridge's book, The Way of the Wild Heart, later I think he named it Fathered by God. There are 6 stages of the masculine journey. And stage 1 is the stage of the beloved son. So masculinity, little boy's masculinity, want to know, his masculine soul want to know, my father loves me, I'm part of his world. That's it. Unconditional love. Second is like cowboy, exploration, jumping fences, whatever, catching fish. And then is the warrior. And now, if you didn't have that baseline of love in the first stage, the second stage is like we see with Ernest Hemingway or Theodore Roosevelt. You have them because they had the adventure with their father. They learned manly skills. But then, because the first stage was missing, they overused the skills that they've learned in the second stages. And they presented to the world this image of, that's what I'm about. But few of us ask why. They think, that's how they are. But why? When you look at Bear Grylls, he had the baseline of love. He said, no doubt, me and my father, I miss my times with my father. They were bonding times, intimate times, fun. But when it was a time for adventure, my father pushed me because I agreed to it, he said. And then I really wanted to be pushed. He said, it's like, wow, really? You didn't think that he was abusing you? No, because he loved you. You knew that in your body, not in your mind. Now, many of us, well, my father loved me, of course. Of course, he beat me up. But it's like with their head, they can see, my father loved me. But I'm not talking about the head. I'm, again, that Greek understanding of brain, like feelings and reason divided. That's wrong. We're talking about holistically. You feel things in your body. Your mind is reflected in the body, whether you like it or not. And so, for Bear Grylls to be such personality that's far more rounded by those warriors out there who have to show to the world how tough they are, because his father loved him. He felt masculine enough. He didn't need the big image to prove to the world, to himself, that he was masculine. He knew it, and so he went on to pursue his life. Much of what was like warrior stuff and masculinity, but not all. Imagine when you get old, 60, 70, will you still be doing things like Theodore Roosevelt did when he was in his 50s, fighting with people? Like, no, there's far more to you than your physical abilities. But many men miss that when they grow old, because that was their shield, their identity. We all, just like some people would miss their intellectual prowess, because that's all they have to hide behind. But I make the argument that we don't have to. We need to deal with our fatherhood and still reclaim the heritage of our fathers inside of us, in our bodies. I know it sounds weird, but it's true. And this is what Now the next chapter. This is a very intimate personal chapter, and some of you would say, what a weirdo, why did you put that there? It's about me meeting God as a father. Make of it what you will. This is, and I am a man of faith. I mean, I had this amazing experience in Zambia back in 2011. But faith alone is not enough to get you through life in one piece, literally feeling whole. I knew that I had a father wound and I didn't know what to do with it. I knew that I needed healing. There was a lot of pain poured out, but then what? Forgive my father? Definitely. But then I also had to take my father down from this pedestal, because when you've not had something, you tend to be oriented towards that thing internally. And it's like your idol, basically. And I had to remove that and be open in faith to see what will show up, and not what in my case was who. But that's not important. You don't have to be a man of a person of faith. But what's important is what happened afterwards. That's what's important. Like, I changed. My whole physicality changed. More at peace with myself. Many things changed. I mean, prior to that, we're talking about huge change from one day to another. Prior to that, I was watching Gladiator, which is such a great movie. And every time when I watched Gladiator prior to that, when Commodus, played brilliantly by Joaquin Phoenix, this really traumatized, twisted, sick man who was father wounded, every time when he was talking about his life and how he couldn't sleep at night, and how much, and when he expressed himself, his father pain to his father before he killed him. If you haven't watched the movie, spoiler alert, it was only 25 years ago. I would feel that emotion, the father heart, the father hunger, that like, oh, yeah, I'm in the same boat with you. And I also had nightmares for most of my life, couldn't sleep well. After that moment, and I'm not saying this to brag, I'm not saying that, oh, this is what should happen to each one of them, I'm just saying what happened to me. After this moment of meeting God as a father, I watched that movie that same night, that same evening afterwards. I did not feel anything. I did not feel any kinship with that traumatized, broken man. I felt sorry for him, but that was not my pain anymore. Some things in my body have changed. I'll just leave you with that. Make of it what you will. Chapter 8, which is the last chapter, honor thy father for your own sake. What's honor? Well, depending how you see it in our world, but I tend to look far back. And when you dig out the old Hebrew scriptures, like honor, to honor someone or something, it means weighty. Take it seriously. Take something with the weight that it deserves. So if you don't honor your father, it's like most of us don't. We're either trying to prove to them something or to be like them, but because they didn't love us enough. Like Hemingway. Or we hate them, we're against them, I'll never be like you. And it's like, okay, in both ways, something in us from our fathers had not been accepted, embraced, and honored. I don't mean to justify the bad stuff that your father did, or the lack of love in your relationship. This stuff needs to be worked through, expressed emotionally, forgiven eventually. But I'm not talking about this. This is the father wound. This is why I've written this book. Yes, we need to heal the wound, definitely. But the wound is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. And what's the end? That's what the world doesn't tell you. What is the end? Why do people need to heal their father wounds? Why do men need to heal their father wounds? In order to become who we couldn't become because of the father wound. So, I've got a friend in his 70s. He was born actually the same year as my dad. He's been one of my closest friends. I'll call him Jack. I call him Jack in the book. Jack had a profound father hunger. His father didn't like him at all. He didn't love him. Not only did he not love him, but he didn't like him. And in fact, a few times Jack tried to communicate, to show something to his father, like to stand up to him, he just slap him in the face. And he said, I learned masculinity, these things, like this love, no. And he became very quiet, a lovely man, but really wounded by that kind of masculinity. His father was a bit of a macho guy. And Jack never felt that he belonged in the world of men. He didn't feel that he belonged in the world, full stop, let alone the world of men. Because of other things, the mother wound as well, but the father wound is huge. Did he forgive his father in time? He did. But he never knew that he needed to honor his father, to accept his father, to embrace his father, to make his amends, not in person, his father's dead, but in his soul. And there is a process, And Jack followed that process. Something amazing happened. He did have this supernatural meeting with his father. I know it might sound a bit kooky, but it's all true. How do you know it's true? You shall know them by their fruits. Look at the fruits in someone's life. I just described to you what happened to me. In my body, I'm different. I dropped many things, including physically. I dropped some of that oversized baggage I was carrying with the muscle and the gym, the endless activity. I dropped that stuff. Much of that just gone physically. So when you look at Jack today, it's like, wow, he behaves, comes across as lighter, gentler, and yet more masculine than he's ever been before. That was not his goal, but that's the result of honoring our fathers. In our bodies, I mean, not just on paper. So there was a process, took time, but eventually it didn't even take a long time, he had few encounters in his own soul with his father, basically, because he chose to honor him, and things manifested. Straight away, literally next week, he wrote to me, he said, something interesting happened. He was in the bedroom one morning, woke up, he saw the clock on the wall with annoyance that the clock's broken. And he said, normally I never like things to break because I can't fix things and I don't want to fix things. I've got other things to do and I'm very irritable when that happens. But he said, this morning, I was surprised at what came up inside of me. It's like, let me see why this thing broke. I want to take it apart. And it's like, he's in his 70s. He's never been this way. Why? Going back to the masculine blueprint, men being good with their hands, being curious, trying to fix things. That's the masculine blueprint. That's what we all men share, but most of us don't have it because of lack of love or wrongful love from our fathers, whatever. And that's what I talk about being feminized as well, because we move towards the opposite of our father. Therefore, we side with the feminine energy more. But the masculine blueprint is there inside of us, waiting to be released, capitalized on. And that's what happened to Jack. Wow, amazing. Another thing that happened literally like a month later was when he was on a holiday with his family. One of his daughter said to her child, who is his grandson, said, if you don't behave, I'm gonna call grandpa. And he said, that threw me. I'm thinking, did people even see that I was here? Because for a long time he was struggling with presence, because his father's presence was so monstrous, so overbearing. He escaped his father's presence. He literally would leave the house, would stay away from his father. And so therefore later he couldn't embody his own masculine presence. And things were missing there. But after this work of redeeming and honoring his father, his presence was not only noticed, but his daughter actually used him as a threat. He's not a threatening guy. He never wanted to be a threatening guy because his father was, obviously. So you move against that, or you emulate that. It's this way or that way. But the result of becoming fully masculine, the result of becoming one with our fathers, one of the results is we become fully masculine. We become more, that masculine blueprint is more available to us. And we have that warrior side as well, able to be cultivated, and that presence in his way is more like a king's presence in his palace. You know he's there. He doesn't need to come beat you up to make you aware of that. He's like the lion in the jungle. Honor thy father. And there's another story there. And a man locked deep into sexual struggles that we identified were the result of the father wound. And that was amazing, and that had a supernatural, spiritual twist to it as well. There are many stories like that, and few of them are in the book. And this is why I'm sharing this with you. To come full circle, in this book I make the case for the masculine blueprint. This is something that all men share, the ability to be strong with others, to be tough, to work with your hands, to hold your own, to be competitive. These are things that typically we see in bullies, in overbearing, loud, macho people, but that doesn't mean they're bad. It's just one side of masculinity that if that's all they had, that's all they were hiding behind. So this is the masculine blueprint in a nutshell, but also you need a soul. We have a soul. Each person has a soul, which is like the mind, will, and emotions individually. Uniqueness, creativity. And in today's world, you either have people who are stuck with that blueprint, they have no soul, they don't feel their soul, they don't know their soul because it's traumatized, damaged. And so they hide behind the macho masculine pursuits, and that's what they're about. You see them on the outside, it's very externalized because the masculine blueprint is very overt. The soul, I wouldn't say it's feminine, but it has those traits, the feeling, it's more covert, more in its expression of energy, more internalized. And so you have men who are loud, macho, overt, masculine blueprint, that's what always about the fatherland. And you have men who probably hate their fathers, more feminized on the inside at least, on the outside at least, who are more in touch with feelings, but they're not good at the masculine blueprint general toughness, I guess, and ability to handle life, ability to handle confrontation. And so they hide. So I have men who are in your face and men who hide. And it's all, generally speaking, a result of the father wound. And this is why I wrote this book. Because this book is not just called The Father Wound, it's called The Father Wound and the Blueprint for Masculinity. Because we don't just need to heal the wound. We need to become who we're meant to be. We need to find out why we need to heal the wound, what the wound has prevented us from being, and go after that. I believe this is missing in the world today. I believe in today's world, men are just told that they shouldn't be toxic and they just should be in therapy forever and hold hands forever and sing and open their kingdoms and borders to anyone who just want to be connected to them without any protection, because that's toxic. So you either have that, or what's the alternative? Today's world doesn't offer any alternative to men. You either have that, or you have men who are going on their own and just being macho and rebelling against the system, rightfully so. You see why. But going macho and going against things is not ideal, is it? The solution is to deal with your father wound. Only when men have dealt with their father wound, but then recover the masculine blueprint in them, weak men will become strong, and strong, tough, loud men will become able to feel. So you will have then masculinity, such as the world has never seen before. And I'm not claiming that I can bring that about. Even if I had the influence, I wouldn't be able to make men go on that journey. But I've seen glimpses of it, and it's exciting, it's beautiful. I think there's far more to men that meets the eye. We all have the masculine blueprint. No matter how soft, gentle, fatherless, father hunger you might have been, you have things inside of you that there's a lion there waiting to roar. And no matter how loud and, oh, I don't know about these things, I can't feel, just leave me alone, that's how I've always done it. How overcompensating you are. There is far more to you than meets the eye. There's deeper, sensitive, softer nature. That doesn't mean you should drop your guard on the outside, but it means you need to get in touch with your soul so that you know when to be a warrior and when to be a poet, warrior poet. Some people are only warriors, some people are only poets. We need both. We need to deal with our father wound and reclaim our masculine blueprint in order to become real men. And I believe that's how God made us. Alright guys, thanks for listening. See you later.